I'll quickly introduce myself. I'm Franz Dias, and I'm sort of a hobby board game enthusiast. So I don't really do this for a living, but I really enjoy playing board games and thus designing board games. Uh, may I request Venkat to share a little bit about himself, if he'd like?
Hi everyone. So my name is Venkat. I actually am co-founder for this company called Luma World. So we make a lot of educational games apart from other products. So if you really want to know if I'm an educational company or a board game company, I would say I'm an educational company. But I think board games is our hero, and that's really what makes us click. So yeah. We're based out of Bombay, by the way.
Fabulous. Thank you, Venkat. Can we request Prasad Paramashivappa to please introduce himself?
Hey, hi guys. Very good morning. First of all, thanks a lot for putting this together. About myself, I'm based out of Bangalore. I used to make educational toys, many decades back, way back between 90 and 2000. I moved out. I'm part of the edtech space. I'm in the training domain. I've been working on language games similar to Scrabble. I've prototyped the Kannada version of it, fine tuning some aspects. Hopefully, in the coming months, I should have it ready.
Wonderful. Thank you, Prasad. We have quite a few people who are joined. I'm sorry, we're just going to go alphabetically till we are ready to begin in maybe another 1 minute. So please excuse us if you're not able to accommodate everyone. May I request Amishi Paras Rampuria to introduce herself?
Hi guys, I'm Amishi as he just said, and so nice to be with all of you guys on Sunday morning and talk about this. Hope everyone's staying safe. And just to tell you very quickly about what we do, I run a company called Upcyclers Lab, and we basically make board games, puzzles, storybooks, and other products on environment. So we exclusively work on environment concept. So just like Luma World is all about education, we are all about environment, and board games for us is one approach that we're taking for play-based learning in this field.
Fabulous. Thank you, Amishi. May I request Amit Badbade to please introduce himself?
Hey, I'm Amit here. I have a startup called Utter. We teach English on a mobile app where I'm basically friends with the monthly cards guys. So joining in to see what's happening here.
Nice.
Great, welcome. It's now 11 o'clock on the clock, so I think we'll step into the seminar. We've got about 24 participants currently, and we are hoping to see a few more joining. Feel free to forward the link to anyone you'd like. For those of you who'd like the easy link, it's bit.ly/Meeple Labs. That's bit.ly/Meeple Labs. What we would request is that you hold your queries and put it into the chat. So there's a chat button on your screen. What you could do is just enter in any queries during the course of any session into the chat, and what we'll do is we'll try and accommodate those questions as a part of the Q&A session. I'd like to welcome everyone, first of all, to this seminar of Meeple Labs, which is a board game design lab initiative. It sort of started off as a set of questions that came out just 2 days ago, and we've put this together relatively quickly. It's good to see, and it's very encouraging to see that we've had a lot of speakers volunteering to come in and share their experience, and it's good to see that there are so many participants that are joining in. This is a series of seminars, so we are hoping to have this on a regular basis, maybe fortnightly, maybe monthly. We'll see based on how it goes. Thank you, Harshal. I like the t-shirt statement too. For those who came in late, we'd request all of you to please mute your mics except for the speakers who would be speaking speaking during each individual session. We've got 4 sessions that are lined up today, and the format is essentially going to be an introduction to the session, followed by a round where I have the list of queries and inputs that were shared on the labs team a couple of days ago. And we are going to put forth those queries and get some inputs from all our speakers. We'll be moderating it, so I'll be sort of keeping track of time to ensure that we cover as much as possible. If there are points that we cannot cover, what we'll do is we'll probably take them up in the next session. This is the first seminar series that we're holding, so there may be a few glitches. Do bear with us, but we'll try and keep this as interactive as possible and as enriching as possible. We hope all of you guys have a great time. Just to let you know, this session is being recorded, and a link of this recording will be sent out to everyone in the labs group. Do feel free to send it out to anyone who'd find this information useful. So great. Having said that, let's move on to the first session of the day. Our first session is based on game design, and we've got 3 speakers who'd be sharing for this particular session. We've got Anuja Pitre from Monthly Cards. I'm sure all of you have heard of Monthly Cards. I'll probably ask Anuja to share a little bit about herself for those who came in late, so that we can have a quick round of introduction on what she does. After Anuja, we've got Amit Gadge from Crimson Studios. He's a well-known name in the board design circles. And then we've got Falgun, who you've probably already seen on the camera from Dice Toy Labs. May I request Anuja to share a little bit about yourself, maybe in about 30 seconds?
Yeah, hi everyone. I hope you can hear me. I am one of the creators of Monthly Cards, and I feel like a bit of an imposter starting this seminar because I'm not a game designer, and our team, we don't have a game designer in the team. But and we don't even work in games. This is the first game that we have created. I have it here with me. It's essentially like trump cards, but with members of the parliament in the Lok Sabha. So we have about 100 in here, and we have statistics like assets, criminal cases, number of terms, and it essentially just plays exactly like trump cards. So that's my introduction.
Wonderful. Thank you, Anuja.
Yeah.
Hey, Amit, could I request you to share a quick introduction about yourself?
Amit, you're on mute.
Amit, you need to unmute yourself.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Hey everyone, myself Amit Gadge. I am an artist by profession, and I run a small studio setup called as Screen Studio, where we do artwork for board games and comic books. So majorly for me, it's more about doing artwork for board games. I've worked on many Kickstarters. They are like successful Kickstarters, and happy to be part of this team.
Wonderful. Thank you, Amit. Falgun, over to you. Could you give us a quick introduction on yourself?
Yeah, so you guys might have seen a lot of messages from me in the group. So we started Dice Toy Labs 2 years ago. We're just turning 2 next month, and we have gone through a lot of ups and downs, burned our fingers a lot, and this is the main reason why I keep sharing the pain points that we face, so that we don't go through the same issues. So just to quickly, let you know that we have quite a lot of games in the pipeline, and we have a couple of games already live. Just give me a second. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, working with artists, coming up with a whole, it's not just about coming up with an idea and making that into a product, right? It's the entire life cycle. So you have to conceptualize, and you have to prototype it, test it, design, production, figure out the supply chain, the logistics, sales, marketing. So the entire life cycle, I think we have lived through a couple of them now, and pretty, taken a lot of hammering from every side. So yeah, I'd be very happy to share our perspective. So, again, France, one disclaimer is that everyone's views are different, depends on the circumstances. So, nobody's right, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely correct, Falgun. And I think, given that this is a budding space that is just coming up, and everybody is still in that process of learning, and that's why all of us are here. So, for sure, and we are happy to, get a view of the experience of the members of today's panel. So let's jump into the list of questions that we have. So, amongst the primary questions that we had in terms of game design, the first question, and this is maybe for the three of you guys, and you all can take turns to address it and share your views, is how exactly do designers determine a game theme? How is it that you come up with a game theme? Does the theme precede the design or subsede the design? Maybe we can start off with Anuja, who has already got a game that is very thematic and that's released to the market.
right.
Yeah, so I'd like to say again that we don't come from a game design background. So our theme sort of, I mean, the fact that we made a game out, we didn't have it in our heads that we were going to make a game. So our company works with a lot of data. So we've been working with NGOs and company foundations measuring their impact for the last 3 years. And we only in 2019, before the elections, we realized that there was a lot of scope in, making information accessible to citizens is very important before one goes and votes. And we started to create products that were aligned with that, sort of getting information that was already out there, publicly available, that research bodies had put together while working with the government. They'd already put this out, but it was in the form of Excel sheets and things, formats that weren't very accessible to citizens, or rather, it's just not interesting enough. So, when you go look at just a ton of numbers, you don't know how to consume it, you don't remember anything. So, what we decided is this was a very simple format, and I'll just show you one of the cards. So, here is Mulayam Singh Yadav. And this is sort of what we put together, and this is exactly what's available from on ADR, like myneta.info. It's a website that people use to go check out statistics on the candidates that stand for elections. So this is exactly it, except if you see it in an Excel format, you're not going to remember anything. But as soon as you play this game more and more, there's so much retention of numbers. Like, who has the highest criminal cases, and you suddenly know what the highest assets someone has declared in the Lok Sabha just by playing this game. So we realized that the game format specifically was very useful for us. And this is something, of course, it's a borrowed format. It's something that already exists. We've grown up with it. We hadn't seen that format being used. So it sort of happened as a problem solving, a solution to a problem, rather than we set our minds to creating a game and now we've created a game. So if
That's
that makes
very
sense, yeah.
very interesting. In fact, to see that data has really driven your game theme and your game design. Even though you say that you don't have a designer on board, but from what we're hearing, it seems that a lot of the theme has come from this need to have to make people aware of the kind of data that is present on politicians and politics that they would usually not be able to be in a format that they could consume. Wow, wonderful. Thank you for sharing that, Anuja. May I request Amit to share a little bit? I'm sure Amit has worked on a multitude of themes in his potential as design.
Yes. So we all know, like, games can be designed by like two different ways. Either you go with the mechanics first, and then you put on a theme to your game,
Amit, if you could come a little
or you
closer to the
first
mic, maybe, because
decide
we're
on
not able to hear you very
theme of
clearly.
your game, then you start working on the mechanics. For me, my game just came through theme. Clear now? Hello?
It's slightly more clear now.
Hello, thanks.
Yes, Amit, go ahead,
Yeah,
please.
we can hear you.
Yeah. So I was saying like most of the times, like there are only two ways of how you design your game. Either you go with the mechanics first. Yeah. So either you go with your mechanics first and then you add a theme to your game, or you start with a theme and then you add mechanics to your game. For me, most of the time, I realized the themes were more important for my games rather than the mechanics. So I started with the themes and then I added a few mechanics to the game. So like while I was working on Vatas, one thing I realized like there are many games which are based on Indian themes, like say for example Jaipur or any other games. So I was just wondering like why can't we make a game based on our Indian theme, and we already have one of the wonders with us. So I started off thinking with what if we do a game about Taj Mahal, and so on. And then I realized there is a one beautiful mechanics everyone loves the worker placement thing. Why not to have it to the game? So that is how I came up with game mechanics after fixing on the theme. And for the second game, like which I'm working with Falgun, the game is based on Indus Valley civilization. So it just clicked to Falgun, like why are not we doing any game based on any civilization? And we have such a great Indus Valley civilization with us. And based on that theme, we figure out like roll and write is very popular among board gamers, and it's very like intriguing to play something in such a small component scale and have so much of fun. And that's how we started working on Indus, and that too like first working on the theme and then going on to the mechanics.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Falgun, could we get some of your inputs as well, please? You've done quite a few games that are based on, Indian history. So it'd be good to hear what you think.
The way we approach is very, very, very different. It's basically like, you know how it is, right? You get this idea, you can't sleep for 3 nights, and it's like in your mind, and you want to do something about it. That's it. That's all you need, that's all you need. If you have that game idea or a theme or a mechanism that you are pondering over for the last 3 4 days, and you're dying to make a game based on that, um, the best way is to just go ahead and work on something, whatever takes it to the next level. It could be starting off with the art even before you figured out the game. It inspires you. So that's how we work. I mean, uh, a lot of people have found it very strange that we actually start off with the artwork first and then figure out the game mechanics. But it's mostly like, what is that hook that is like kind of like making you go crazy, like, oh man, I have to talk to all these publishers, game designers, figure out production. So that means that you have been bitten. Okay, so once that happens, that's it. Just figure out the what is that is going to take you to the next level. So catch hold of an artist or talk to someone who's in the business, in case that'll kind of give you a better push to go forward, inspire you to go forward. Then just do that, hustle every day. Don't take a seat back and chill and think one day the idea will hit you and all that. But yeah, the way we approach design is like that. So we come up with ideas every day. I mean, some of you guys on the group know that I keep pestering you with all the ideas, right? But how many of them fit into the checklist, right? Will it be a good business? Can it be scaled as a business? Will it be profitable? Will Indians relate to it? So there are a lot of parameters that you need to check before you get into design. So we think from a business perspective, and we always knew that our strengths were being creative and coming up with ideas and fitting in mechanisms and stuff like that. But how do you convert that into a business, right? Into a revenue generating business? So that was what we are also like, after a couple of years now in the business, we have pivoted 100 times. So, I'm sure my wife will agree, because we started off with comics, then moved into action figures, and then moved into mini figures, and then building sets and stuff, and then we were like, what are we doing? It's like, we love board games. We play board games. Why are we making something else? So we were like, okay, let's try out something, and we just tried out Yuddha Bhumi, and it became very popular among kids and adults and everybody. So that's like, that helped us. That got the ball rolling. I don't want to take.
So with Yudh Bhumi, if I may ask, you mentioned that you tried out multiple different avenues. What is it that drove you on the design of Yudh Bhumi? Was it business, or was it the idea that led to the theme?
So when we started, the underlying DNA was very simple. We are going to make cool Indian products. That's it. Cool Indian products in such a way that it's not going to be the other. Typically when you say Indian toys or games or stuff, what the first thing that comes to your mind are like, the ancient Indian games, or Chokabara, stuff like that, right? Or Channapatna toys, or the wooden toys that we see at fairs and stuff like that. So we wanted to then we realized that mindset, to change that mindset, to think that, hey, wait, Indians can make cool stuff as well, was like a huge barrier to cross. So, what we basically learned was that game design is one thing, idea is one thing, content is one thing, right? But if you really want to convert that into a business, then it's a different ballgame. You need to have people who will buy your product. That's the end of the thing. So work on that. So you have to work on building that market, So again, it all drives down to what is that motive that you have. Is it that as a designer, do you want to just have your product? You want to just see the product in the market in someone's hand, somebody playing with it, taking Instagram pictures, saying that, hey, I played this cool new Indian game? Or do you want to convert that into a business? Do you want it to be a revenue generating engine for you, where you can chill, take a month-long holiday while your products are selling, right? So what is it that you want to do? That's exactly the kind of problem statement we are trying to solve as well.
So that's a very interesting perspective on game design, and from all the three speakers that we've had, we've seen that there are three very different perspectives that we've got, and all of them definitely valid in their own right. Just to sum up. When we spoke with Anuja, what she said was that data is what drove them to create the game. With Amit, it's two different kinds of approach, right? Either the theme can drive the game, or the mechanic can drive how the theme can be overlaid with, as he illustrated with the example of Vataj and Indus. And Falgun also, shared a very interesting perspective about the business part of it. And this somewhere is important to ensure that the industry does grow, because at the end of the day, if your game isn't commercially successful, then it remains just a hobby, and that doesn't really lead to the industry growing. But again, that's just my opinion here. And of course, Falgun made an amazing point of having a mindset of creating cool products, and I think that's something that the three of you guys all have in common. You'll have that amazing mindset to create something great and leave behind a mark, and that's where we are seeing some great products that are rolling out. We are now at about 11:21. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the next question on game design. I'm going to do it in a slightly different format. So it's going to be a bit of rapid fire, where I'm going to ask you for the three specific things that you look for when you're choosing an art partner. So we'll go in the reverse. If you could give me in 3 lines, or maybe in 3 words, that would be really great. So how do you find the right art partner? What do you look for? We'll start with Falgun. 3 small things.
Okay. The perfect art partner is someone who is just self-motivated. You don't have to, we work with hundreds of artists right now, and we come across a lot of artists where they have basically 2 different mindsets. One mindset is I just want to make money out of using my art style or using their creative talent that they have, or the other person who really wants to add value to what you're doing. So there are, like, for example, I want to show off by saying that Amit has done epic work for us. Amit, like, for example, if you Amit, right, he has a lot of experience with working with board games, right? So it was very simple to explain to him what is it that we need. It was like, okay, so we have this game, we have a board, we have a box, we have an art, like cards and tokens and blah blah blah. And it's like, okay, that's cool, man. And figure it out. And he knows, like, if it's a card, then this should be the layout. If it's a box, it should be a layout. Where will you put your logo and stuff like that, right? So if you find someone like Amit, we know that Amit has limited bandwidth right now, and we can't keep bugging him to design each and every game of ours. And also, what we do is we maintain a pool of artists so that we bring in a fresh perspective. So the lesson that we have learned while working with these artists is once you have chosen the art style for your game, right? Once we give the briefing, I just leave everything on the artist. I'm not going to micromanage him. I'm not going to drive him up the wall by saying, hey, I want it this way, I want it that way. This angle is like that. Let him be creative. Let him explore. Let him feel that, him or her, let them feel that they're part of the design process of an epic product that's going to be, right? So,
wonderful, wonderful. So if I were to sum it up, I'd say the three things that you look for in an artist are somebody who's very self-motivated, someone who can add a lot of value to your final product, and definitely somebody who'd be able to take the brief of style and then do it without any micromanagement. Wonderful. So let's move to Amit. And Amit has a lot of experience in the design space. Amit, if you could, in 3 words or 3 lines, tell us what is it that publishers or designers look for in an art partner?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So for me, I think that the question should be reversed. Like, what do the artists look forward from a designer
of course,
or from a publisher? Right. Right. For us, like specifically for me, what forward is the work that I'm going to do in this board game is challenging. Is this something which I haven't done before? Like something like I'll be interested myself to play that game, or something be interested to do the artwork for. That is the first question comes to mind. So money matters and all those things are very, very like later stage. First thing is how intriguing is the game for you, or how much challenging it is for you to design, do the artwork part of it. That is the first part. Second thing is, like understanding the requirement of the designers or understanding the requirement of publishers is very important. Like as Falgun said, it should be very important. Like if someone is giving you the descriptions or all the details about what they are looking forward in their game, what kind of theme they have, if your art style fits into your game perfectly, that is very important as a designer or as an artist to understand the requirement of the publisher or designer. So that is one thing. And commitment to your project is very, very much important. I have seen a lack of commitment from designer, from artists, from artists specifically speaking. People are not so much committed to the timeline or committed to the project. They just take up the jobs, they take multiple things on their plate and finish it on time. So I would suggest everyone pick up 1 or 2 projects at the moment and fully focus and concentrate on the work and give your 100% to that project. So these are the 3 things which I would like to suggest. And apart from that, like Falgun said, I would like to see a lot of artists join us the community, because there's a lot of potential for board games artwork. Like there's a lot of jobs out in the market where we'll like proper artists to work with us. So I would like to see more people join. So right now we have Sahana, we have Amrit who are doing good work, good quality work. Yeah. So I'd like to see
that's definitely a good thought, and I'm pretty sure that that could be a session in itself in one of the subsequent series of the seminar series.
Yeah.
I will hand over to Anuja now and ask her, what is it that she looked for in an artist when they did monthly cards, and what is it that they would look for in an artist or a designer if they have to create another game in future.
Okay, so this is we were in a bit of a unique situation because I'm myself a visual designer and illustrator. So the what you see, which is the product, has largely come from my art direction, and we collaborated with another design studio that's never created a game before. So what Falgun and Avid both sells is something that we didn't have, and I would say still don't have. So I'm actually looking forward to understanding that through further. The marketing bit of this seminar, or just a more elaborate seminar just on this piece, because we still don't have that knowledge. But I think the unique thing that we had about our game is that we just had one type of component, which is a card. So it was easier for us to create art for just that component. And the other thing I would like to say is that because the content is political in nature, I think what I was looking for is the sensitivity in the brief that needed to be understood, which is that we've chosen colors that are politically neutral. We've gone to the extent of even for us to be able to create non-caricaturistic illustrations of the mantris themselves, which was a bit of a tricky area to play in, is something that I needed the art partner to understand. So I think those things were taken care of in this game. But as far as whether this game would sell, we're still a bit in the dark about that. So I have no comments on that. But yeah. But since I'm an artist myself, this is my input. Yeah.
Wonderful, thank you. So one common thing that I've seen in all these three threads is that the designer should be able to adapt to the art style. That's something that all three of you all mentioned in some way or the other. Whether it be in terms of being sensitive to the theme of the game, so that it's easily adapted, or just getting the game theme absolutely correct, or having the designer's art style fit into your overall vision of the game. Fantastic. So what we're going to do now is we're going to break for this particular session on game design. We still have three more questions that emerged from the Excel sheet that we looked at on the labs team. However, I think that those three questions definitely have merit to be a seminar in themselves. So we'll not take them in this round, and we'll move on to the next particular space, which is manufacturing. Before we move on, I'd like to thank all our three speakers. Thank you, Anuja, Amit, and Falgun, for sharing your experiences, and all of us are very grateful. There were two comments and questions that came up in the chat. Mangesh said he'd like to add a little bit on game design. We'll maybe give him 1 or 2 minutes. And Amishi mentioned that it does make sense and it's viable to try and involve the target audience in the design process. And that's maybe something that we can come down to when we look at our sessions on prototyping and finding the right group of playtesters, which is one of the topics that emerged. Mangesh, if you'd like to take a minute to share something on game design, which is related to the topics that we just discussed, please do go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Hi, Mangesh here. I am based in Pune. I teach video game design actually in an institute here, and I have a 7-8 years of video game design experience. And while doing that, I was also doing some board game design prototypes. So someone asked like how you guys come up with the game ideas, right? So I have a quick like 7-8 lines of like one-liners which can help you come up with a game idea. And the first one is like you can evolve an existing game. So you take a game that you like, you remove one of the mechanics and add some other mechanic. You can try and implement these things. The second one is like you start with building a core mechanic, which actually I think Amit mentioned. Like you start with the mechanic and then you build a game theme around it. The third thing which I personally love to do is mashup. Like I mash up two genres. I will take worker placement and mix it with deck building. Is it possible? Like things like this. So one of the games that I worked on was a tower defense game, and I added deck building to it. So and it worked out really well. The project was based in Montenegro, and it was a educational project, so it never got released. But uh, so something like that can definitely happen. The fourth thing, Falgun already mentioned, the playtesting sessions are extremely important. Your idea is like a tip of the iceberg. The implementation is the biggest part, which is below the water, which you don't see actually. The fifth thing is like I usually like to take real world inspirations. I see like so. I am not sure if you have heard of, but there was a game called PC Building Simulator. Now, being a PC gamer, I used to look around and like uh, so you see your PC, right? So how about making a game which allows you to make your PC? Like I took a real world inspiration, and actually someone managed to like make it into a full game on computer. But so I had a similar idea too. The next thing I would like to say is like you can add very tight constraints. Like this is something that you may find a little technical, but like you restrict your game ideas. Like my game will not have more than 60 cards. What can you do with it? Something like that. So this is what I would like to add to the question that we had. That's it.
Thank you, Mangesh. Thank you so much for sharing that. So, with that, we come to the end of the game design session for today. At this point, it's good to note that we have about 40 participants in addition to myself on the seminar. So, it's good to see that there are so many people who are spending their Sunday morning with us to sort of understand the design process and the various experiences that some of our colleagues have to share. We'll move on to the next series on manufacturing. And I'd like to invite Harshal Modi and Falgun to share their experiences here. We could maybe start off with Harshal, and Falgun could probably chip in, so we could do this sort of like a panel discussion. What the first question that we're going to look at is, manufacturing basics. What is it that we should consider when we're designing game components to ensure that manufacturing is optimal and that there's a lot more that can be done in as little cost as possible? Over to you guys, Harshal and Falgun.
So, Falgun, you want to say something before we start, considering the fact that you have a little bit more experience
Harshal, if you're speaking, you're not very audible, so you'd probably have to come a little closer to the mic.
Sorry, am I audible now? This is better or?
No, we still can't hear you very clearly. It's still very faint.
Okay, so now is it better? As in, because I don't know where my mic is. Okay, so
Yeah.
you know what? Let Falgun start off. Meanwhile, I'll just switch my device into the phone, and then we can start off from there.
Perfect. Sounds good. Falgun, why don't you begin? Let's talk
Uh,
about what you do to optimize this process.
yeah, well, my best friend has been the 3D printer. That was the best ever investment that we ever made at the start of this business. It costed a bit then, but believe me, it will just accelerate your process of prototyping and designing and everything, right? Thanks, Ronak. So, all right. So, see, again, it's a very popular question. A lot of people might have faced it as well. Design versus final product, right? So designers can come up with a super creative, imaginative kind of a thing, and you yourself, you could, if you didn't have the exposure to manufacturing and the roadblocks out there, the first thing that you would do is, I want to have this, I want to have the gears turning, I want to have these blocks fitting into each other, custom blocks, things to look like a dinosaur or stuff like that, right? But that is the big roadblock. Can you do it in India? Do you have the money to do it? Do you have designers to design the manufacturing ready design for you. Like, not everything that you design on Tinkercad or any of the 3D modeling softwares are ready for manufacturing, because there's like a that's like a whole different ball game. I'm sure Harshal can add a lot more value there. So, there are some undercuts and stuff that is hidden. You cannot manufacture. It's crazy. So, instead of going through the pain point of putting 100% focus on the designer to come up with a component, or, it could be tiles or tokens or artwork, or it could be boards, the player boards that you open up. It's always better to have a holistic view from day one. Involve everybody. I know you are creative. You might be working with a partner who is super creative, but always think of it from the lens of a manufacturer. Do you have manufacturing capability near you? First point, because it matters a lot. Otherwise, your products are going to be stuck in a warehouse, or just like the lockdown going on right now, there would be stuff stuck at customs, or probably not even shipped from the country. And unfortunately, China is bloody awesome at making components, and we all know this. They are bloody awesome. You cannot find even 80% of the components that they make a similar vendor like that in India. Okay, so you'll have to figure out a jugaad, or some sort of an alternative for it, or really shell out money to get the component out, right? So always look at it from a manufacturing perspective. Even when you're thinking about a box, even if you're thinking about including a book in your game, keep checking with the manufacturer. And as a D2C company, I mean, we our core thing is about shipping our products, right? Like how Shweta was saying, the weight of the product is a huge thing, because every 500 grams that you add to the game, it's doubling your shipping cost. So you have to keep that in your mind as well. So there are a lot of parameters that you have to think about. Involve everybody. Do not put 100% focus on just the designer or the creative guy in your team. I hope that answers some of the questions.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that, Falgun. That was very insightful, and I'm sure very useful for a lot of us who are trying to create a game that could be manufactured. Harshal is back. Welcome. So, Harshal, why don't you share, your from your experience, what is it that could go into ensuring that the manufacturing process is as optimal as possible? Just to sum up, Falgun mentioned that you need to have a holistic view from day one. You need to figure out where the manufacturer's location is, because that is something that may also play a significant role. And there's also the dearth of options that are available in India, given that China is a much more superior alternative in terms of their capability, and we don't really have those capabilities in India yet. And Falgun also mentioned that he mentioned an interesting insight on product weight, where he said that every 500 grams increase in weight can double your shipping costs. Would be great to get some of your insights here.
Right, in a lot of things, one of the biggest costs, so to speak, is prototyping and mold manufacturing. So, for example, if we are making a mold for, so am I audible now, or is there some issue with the volume?
Oh, it's much better now. Thank you.
Okay. So one of the biggest the biggest cost components in your game manufacturing will be your mold making, especially if you're going in for metal or plastic components. In this case, what happens is that the more complex designs you have, the more exponential your costs, your mold design costs are. So for example, if you have a simple cube, then your costs will be maybe $1 or $2 per piece, and maybe about 20,000-30,000 rupees for the mold. But if you're going in for a more complex design, like the ones that, like if you're designing a mini or something of that sort, then that is going to be more in terms of 6 figures or 7 figures in rupees, and manufacturing for each will be maybe 2 to 3 digits as far as per piece costs are concerned.
This is because the complexity keeps increasing as you add more complexity or more finesse to the design. So from my perspective, the one of the things that I think of when designing is that see if you can reduce the different types of components that you require. So for example, if you're designing a resource building game and there are 5 different types of resources, then go for the same shape of resources with different colors instead of having 5 different designs for 5 different resources, because what that means is 5 different designs means 5 different molds, which means 5 into whatever the mold cost is going to be, and then each piece is going to be reduced in terms of production as well. One of the bigger issues with India per se, as Falgun rightly pointed out, that China has supremely good production capabilities which India still does not have. One of the issues with India is that low quantity production is still very much an unknown in India. They don't understand the idea that we will be one and done with maybe 5,000, 10,000 components, and we won't need any more per se. Uh, and secondly, the bigger issue also arises is that India also finds it difficult to manufacture very simple designs in very small sizes. So you have your cubes, you have your you have your discs, or maybe Meeple as well. Meeple, like the Carcassonne Meeple is what, about 10, 12, maybe 15 high. That is a very small component for some of the Indian manufacturers. So for them to design, for them to make it is also a bit of a question mark, because they have never really made something so simple in so small a size. Uh, there are a few makers, like for example the Kinder Joy toys that we see in the Kinder Joy egg. There are maybe 3 or 4 manufacturers across the world who make those toys. One of them is based in Ahmedabad. Um, that's the biggest manufacturer that they have. But the problem with those guys is, uh, problem for us per se is that their minimum quantity is somewhere around 100,000 units to maybe a million units. So it's not really viable for us as game designers as of now. If you're manufacturing maybe 500 to 1,000 games is going to be what we will be manufacturing in the first run, and we might not be using it again. So my suggestion is to simplify component design as much as possible, so that at the end, uh, you can reuse the same design in different games. B, you don't need to spend so much on the mold cost. For example, if it's just a cube, maybe I'll buy the mold myself and I'll sell you maybe at a at a more margin to myself. I'll sell you the pieces alone, so that I can sell the same design to another designer, so that at least you don't have to spend on the mold design itself. That's one. So these are some aspects that you can look at. I think we can go in more detail in some of these in a later question, but as far as some broader insights are concerned, this should be enough.
Could I?
Thank you, Harshal. That was very insightful. We have Aziz who's come up. So Aziz, do hold on to your question. I'll just pull you in a minute. Ritika had a couple of experiences that she'd like to share. Ritika, would you like to take 1 or 2 minutes to quickly, share any points you have on this particular topic of manufacturing basics before we can jump in and speak to Aziz?
Hi, hello. So just a quick introduction. We have been working on games, building games since almost 5 years now. We launched our product Bustle last Diwali. So I want to share my personal experience. What Harshal and Falcon correctly said. We have been working on single games since 4 years, and as we didn't think about manufacturing, he made it very complicated. There are too many molds in it and too many components. And now the game has reached to a stage where we can't get into production and and we cannot get the product out. It is stuck somewhere with all the manufacturing done, molds done, everything done, and lakhs of rupees has gone into it. So really, you need to think of the number of components first and then get into designing, because I'm telling you, otherwise it just doesn't work. And you have to keep the Indian market in view, that what is the budget people look for when they buy games. You just can't come up with fancy games and then expect people to buy 2,000 bucks, 3,000 bucks game easily in India. And coming out with Bustle also, we realized that because we targeted for adults, it's very difficult to sell it in India. You have to see the market first, then design the game. And Harshal has given all the right points, which I wanted to point out, that don't get into too many components, and molding is the main part. Like I got a timer done in India here, and I molding with the molding done. We have spent on the mold also, and still we didn't get the right timer. So it's very difficult, even with the dice, the timer. Even I wanted to put out that question. I think it's there on the chat, that are there people in India who give you meeples or dice or timers specifically here correctly for our games?
Wonderful. Thank you, Ritika. I'm now going to pull in Aziz. So, Aziz is part of one of the founders of the board game company, and I'm sure he can, sort of address part of this question, which is also linked to something that Devendra mentioned on the group, which is are there any manufacturers who produce standard components such as meeples or dice or coins or boots? Aziz, would you like to step in now?
Yeah, sorry, I initially just wanted to add on to what Harshal was saying, but I think since Ritika mentioned, I would say that we do have, we don't manufacture ourselves, but we do have components like timers, dice, etc. And we buy in large quantities directly from the factory. So we have relationships with them. So if you guys ever need like timers and stuff, do reach out. We don't manufacture them ourselves, but we can definitely supply you with what you need. On the point that Harshal was mentioning, I think I would just add a caveat that I think maybe one way to put it would be not also that don't add too many components, but I think a lot of designers also think that no, my game must have this very customized component, when you could, if you put some work to it, get away with a standard component. So there are a lot of standard components that exist. Like if you don't need to customize a dice, if you can get away with the standard dice, just use the standard dice. I think using a component that has a pre-existing mold would give you a much more leverage with the manufacturers, say, to reduce the quantities of what you're trying to produce. So I think, or even for example, coins and stuff like that, whatever you can move to cardboard, try to move it to cardboard that you can get away with, like getting it printed and cut. I think that would help reduce the cost quite a bit.
Wonderful, thank you. That was a very interesting perspective. So we are now at time for the manufacturing session. What we'll do is we will close the session and we'll continue with it in a
Franz, I just had one small point to make.
Yes, Falgun, please go ahead.
Before we move on. So when it comes to manufacturing a game, right? Our approach is very, very different. So our approach is like, we are bloody impatient. We want our idea to start generating money for us, right? So, when we actually design a game, we want the game to be in the market in 3 to 4 months, or max worst case scenario is 6 months. Okay. So if that is the case, if we are going to sit and worry about, how am I going to figure out these player pawns or the coins or the components, it's going to take time. So figure out an alternative to it, finish it off, do whatever is the fastest thing to get your product into the market. That is what we call as the minimum viable product, right? Just get the damn product out. Like, cut out all the fancy stuff, basic product, because end of the day, your first product is never right. You would have to figure out small tweaks that you have to do. It could be the rule book, it could be the components, it could be the gameplay. So investing 100% on the first game, thinking that this is the thing, and pushing it into the market, you're just going to hit yourself in the wall. So what I would suggest is bring out an MVP, then figure it out. Like bring out metal components, plastic components. Your customers will love you for bringing out upgrades. They'll be like, man, these guys are really serious about it. So they'll actually start trusting you a lot more when you actually come up with a product. So MVP, minimum viable product. Figure it out, get it done.
So,
Perfect. So I think yes, Harshal, please go ahead.
Just one more point over here. So the thing is that, as Falgun pointed out, that there are a few different types of production elements in your game. You have your board, you have your card, you have your paper, you have your plastic components, you may have metal components. You can go with wooden components as well. Now, each of these elements is a completely different beast in itself as far as production is concerned, and each of them is a completely different manufacturer usually. So you will find very few people who can do both paper and plastic, or both wood and plastic, or wood and paper, because each of them requires a different element as far as manufacturing is concerned. So when you are going for it, I would recommend that you also try to minimize the different elements that you're using. So so as Falgun said, if you're going for coins, then go for cardboard coins or paper coins first. Then in a future iteration or in a future expansion, you can say, okay, fine, we'll bring in metal coins or we'll bring in plastic coins. So that's it. That's after you've reached a certain stage in your sales where you can say, okay, fine, my game is selling, and improving or upgrading the game elements is not going to cost me in the long run. So again, that balance has to be achieved vis-a-vis, okay, fine. Even if you're doing it just for the sake of the art, you're still spending money. So when you're spending money, you have to be very smart in what you're spending money on. So if you can, use the same component that is somewhere publicly available in the market, like whether Aziz has it, or whether Meeple Source has it, or whether Abdul Rahman Street has it, or whether Mohammed Road has it, it's fine. You can just buy it off the market and then use it. And in the future, okay, fine, maybe I'll once the game starts selling, I'll release a upgraded version or an expansion saying that, okay, fine, we are improving the elements in this. That's in the future. So that is something that you need to take care of.
Wonderful. So that these last 2 points that Harshal and Falgun made are a perfect lead into our next session on publishing. One of the questions there is, what exactly is a minimum viable product? And this is something that we keep hearing about, whether we are in the board game design space or even if you're part of any sort of product design company. Maybe we could have Falgun share a little more information on this. Before we move to the next session, I'd like to thank Harshal and Falgun for sharing all these points. I'd like to also thank Ritika and Aziz for stepping in and sharing some more information. Amishi mentioned that as a part of their experience, they had 2 design interns creating designs based on conversations that they had with manufacturers as well as with their target audience, and that's a very interesting approach, given that they interviewed both sides before getting into design, and that also could be a good way to go ahead in terms of finding out what is the right approach in terms of manufacturing, so that you don't make costly mistakes later, and also speaking to your TG to see what is it that your target audience wants, so that you can create a game that that could be successful, and you could create a minimum viable product. Our next session has Aziz Bukwala from the board game company, Vidya Vepuri from Alpha V Ventures, and Falgun again from Dice Toy Labs. We'd like to start off with talking a little bit more about what a minimum viable product is and what exactly does it constitute, and maybe what's the kind of minimum lot size that would be recommended to test the market with an MVP. Over to you, Aziz, Falgun, and Vidya. We could maybe start off with Falgun and then move to Vidya and Aziz.
All right. So MVP is something which is very popularly known nowadays in the startup world as well, right? So it actually makes a lot of sense. MVP also plays a major role in another point where you're testing, you're validating your product even before you go big bang with it. So it serves two major purposes. One purpose is you are figuring out what is the core product that you're actually offering, right? What is the core, the meat of the product? What is it that you're giving them? So you strip out all the fanciness, like fancy components, your fancy packaging, all the stuff. You bring it down to the most minimum yet complete product, right? The most minimum yet complete and economical. So when you create an MVP, it is going to help you massively, because when you are just showing this MVP to your initial pool of customers, it could be 150, even 500 customers, right? And if they buy it, then your product is sure shot going to be very popular in the wider market, right? So this is a very important validating tool, right? If you goof up, you haven't invested so much that you will really feel the pain of it. So finding your MVP is really, really the ultimate goal as a business guy. So once you create a product, figure out your MVP, get the least, talk to the vendor, see if they will negotiate with you to make 100 pieces, 200 pieces of it. But also remember, it's not just about figuring out your product and working in a silo in a very encapsulated way from the entire world, just designing your product. That is not going to work. No matter how sexy your product is, it will not sell if you work in that way, right? So this is where I always keep saying, start developing the MVP with your building your community. So when your product has finally reached a retail ready or sell ready state, you have customers for it. So you have both of them at the same time. If you start, it's okay even if you build your community first without a product. At least they're trusting your instincts of at least the direction that you're going in. So even if you release a kerchief, they will love you, right? So build a community, then create a product. Community is first, brand is first, your company is first, and then comes the product and pricing and all of the other stuff. So two things you have to always think about: not just working on your MVP, figuring out your MVP, but also at the same time building the market awareness, the brand awareness that you actually exist, you have a product, and start building that fan following before you get the product out.
Wonderful. Thank you, Falgun. Vidya, would you like to share a couple of points of view on this particular subject?
Yeah, hi guys. My name is Vidya. I'm from Alpha V Ventures. I'm joining you guys from Pennsylvania right now, so it's pretty late at night, but I've been learning a lot from the WhatsApp group, so I wanted to meet all you guys over this forum, so thanks for organizing that.
Thank you for joining us at this hour.
Thanks, friends. So I've been learning a lot from all of you, and I think that when it comes to publishing, I feel like Anuja when she first started out and said she feels like a bit of an imposter. I don't know if I am the right person for this. That's what I was telling you, friends. But I do work in publishing right now. I'm working on a project that is a localization project. I'm actually working with Amit Gadge, who was a speaker earlier. It's been great working with him. And by localization, I mean we're converting one of the top 5 board games on Board Game Geek into basically a game that is in vernacular in India. And so that's one of the things that we do. We also are looking to publish domestic games as well. And we are also going to we invested in a distribution company in India recently. So we just invested in a company called GEG, and they're hoping to set up a distribution network in India. And it essentially creates retail touch points as well. So that is something that we work on. I also work on licensing deals. And yeah, that's a little bit about me. We are, in terms of what I have to contribute to this concept of the minimum order quantity, we do work right now with a manufacturer in Germany called Ludofact. They're one of the large manufacturers in Germany, and a large manufacturer, I'm sure some of you have heard of them, Panda, in China. So we're doing work with those two. Language is always an issue when you're working with places, but other than that, from time to time, it's been a good experience because they're very well versed with games. If you're working with companies internationally, I think the bare minimum you can go with manufacturers is 1,000 units. But even going with 1,000 units from there, you're better off, obviously, with going with a higher number because economies of scale. So the higher you go up, I can give you the exact numbers in terms of how much the price goes down if anyone's interested in that, because I probably have that down to a science, so I can share those numbers for anyone who's interested. In terms of some of the other things that I wanted to touch on, I don't know if, Franz, you want to talk about a couple of other things, but as a publisher, what we're looking to see is we want to see diversity. I think we want to see interesting topics come out. And I think that, Falgun was talking about community. I think one of the greatest stories that's come out of the board game industry is Wingspan. I don't know if anyone has played that game. I don't know if anyone knows about that game, but it has been a big deal in the board game world because Elizabeth Hargrave did a great job making that game, and everyone, sort of laughed at her, stating, who would play a game that's about birds, right? And it's also a male-dominated industry. So it was great to have a woman's perspective in the gaming world. So I think that game really reached out to a community of bird watchers that they're a very passionate community, and she tapped into that, and she knew she was passionate about it. She knew there was a target group for it, and she actually went to Jamie over at Stonemaier Games to help her produce this game. And so one of the smart things she did was go to someone who has had vast experience at making games, because she knew she had a topic that she loved and that she had the data for. Anuja was saying that she had all the data for this game, monthly cards, right? So Elizabeth had that too. And so she went to someone who was very well versed, a publisher who knew how to make really high quality board games. So I think that's important, going to someone who can maybe help you and who has the knowledge to bring your game to life. I think there are two things. There's range. You can have party games that have more range, so you're reaching out to a larger customer base. And so you're talking higher volume, lower cost. And then you have the opposite side of that spectrum, which is depth, games with higher affinity, right? Players who are really passionate, like someone who plays Gloomhaven or someone who plays, Scythe, heavy games like that. So those are lower volume games. You really have to find passionate players for that who really have the wherewithal to go deep into these games and understand the rules and build their own community. And again, much higher cost in terms of production. And yeah, that's sort of two of the types of games that we look at. And I think the two critical things are knowing who your customer is and how you're going to reach them. So that's important. And I think it's critical that people do business planning, because a lot of the sort of potholes, the pitfalls of running any business. I actually come from a healthcare background. I started a healthcare business in Bombay in 2009. Every issue you guys have made with molds, I think I've probably done that 10 times over, because in personal care we also make a lot of molds. So anyone who's burnt their fingers there, I'm with you. I think you live, you learn. But I think business planning is extremely important. I think with card games, you can probably do less planning. I think when it comes to board games, just due to the nature of the components, you really need to do a lot of planning, because the investment is very large, and the MOQs, the minimum quantity that you have to manufacture, is so high, and the effort that goes into all of the components is so high, that I think business planning is really important. So I don't want to talk too much, but I'm happy to take questions.
That's an interesting perspective. In fact, it next question for you as a publisher, and that essentially is, what is it that publishers are looking for in a game, before they want to get into it? You mentioned a couple of different approaches. One was data-led and community-led. The other was, having a smaller community, and that's maybe a challenge that the publisher would see. So, how is it that a publisher approaches, or rather, a designer should approach a publisher with a pitch to the game? While it may depend on what is the theme of the game, do you have any broad tips that you could share with our community that would help them?
You're saying that you, in terms of how they can pitch.
That's correct. So what are the key points that a designer should look at when they are pitching to a publisher? I believe that Falgun's mentioned that Amit can also share some information on this. We'll probably take him after Vidya.
Okay, so you want to know what designers can look at when they're pitching to a publisher?
That's correct.
My signal, I'm not able to hear you. Okay, all right, great. I think that it really, because we're in such a nascent stage in this industry, I think that this is going to require a lot of back and forth with people. I think it's hard to really say, this is definitely going to work, this isn't going to work. I think that there are things that people have expected to not work in the US or in Europe that have worked really well. I think the important thing is knowing what you're getting into. If you know who your customer is, that's the most critical thing. And sometimes you may go in, I think having a plan is important. I've run a couple of different businesses, and when you have a plan and you come to someone and say, hey, I have this plan and I think that you should invest in it. Well, it's great that you have a plan and you go towards that plan, but sometimes you have to pivot, like Falgun was saying, right? And when you pivot, you may realize that your target consumer was X, but you realize that some other Y consumer is actually falling in love with this product. That's when you pivot and you say that, this is, and so I think it's hard for us to say right now what exactly you need to come with, except come with a plan. I think that the most critical thing is you come with a plan. And then from there, I think it's about collaboration. I think we all have to ask each other, because I love board games. Terraforming Mars is one of my favorite games in the world. If any one of you ever want to play, I tell Amit this all the time. I'm always down to play. But you really have to have a plan, and you have to be collaborating with people. And I think it really depends on the situation. It depends on if it's, like I said, if it's a party game or if it's a card game, if it's something that's, a little with less depth and less heavier. I think you have a different approach versus something that's more, that has more depth. I think with games that require more range, I think we really need to look at setting up a distribution infrastructure that goes into toy stores, that goes into game stores, and that you need that ecosystem of gaming stores. If that ecosystem doesn't exist, it becomes very difficult to ask a consumer, are you willing to invest this money in a game that you haven't seen before, or that you're seeing online? I know the e-commerce has blown up in India since 2008 when I started my business, 2009 when I started my business. But I think you're still asking a lot of a consumer that's new to this industry to ask them to invest all this money when they can't actually see the product, they can't feel the product. There's no place for them to experience it without buying it online or, in maybe these few toy stores that I know about that exist there in India. So I think that's a loaded question. I think that it really depends. But I think it's good to talk to people. It's good to collaborate and then see, if anything's missing from a plan, how do you mitigate risk? So sorry if my talk is very businessy. It's always uncomfortable when I'm with creative people because I'm not very creative, but I work with a lot of creative people. I think of myself as more of a product manager. So
wonderful, and I think that's it's good to get a perspective like that, especially since you come from the publishing and investment business. Amit, would you like to add on to this particular topic?
Yeah, sure. So what I would like to start off with, as designers, we need to understand like every publisher has their own portfolio. Okay, so just for our own design or just for our own game, no publisher is going to break their portfolio and take about design or take about game. So as a designer, we need to understand which publisher are we going to pitch our game. Example, like if I'm designing a party game, I don't pitch my game to Fantasy Fight Games because they will never approve on that. So every publisher has a different genre of games in their portfolio. There are a few publishers who have different genres and different variety of games in their portfolio. So as a designer, we first need to make a list of publishers who already previously published games by on the genre I'm working on. So that is one thing which is very important. Second thing is, see, now there are two different ways of how you pitch to a publisher. First thing is if you have already designed a game and then you are looking for a publisher. So in this case, what I said previously makes sense. Like you look for the right publisher to pitch your game to that publisher. The second way is there are always publishers who are open for new games or they have open submissions. Many times on different forums, publishers ask for a very like filler kind of game, like a 9-card game or something, and they have an open submission. Have already working on like a small game or thing. You can send me your sell sheet and we'll go through it and maybe we can pitch or we can publish your game. So this is the second way of approaching to a publisher. So it's quite important as a designer to understand which portfolio or which publisher I'm sending my game to. For example, if you have very like if you have in your games, something like Simon will be interested to look forward to. So yeah, that's some suggestion from my end. Like there are two different ways of pitching your game to a publisher.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that, Vidya and Amit. I'd like to pass it on to Aziz as well. So Aziz has a lot of experience in the distribution space, and I'm sure he would have something to contribute here. Aziz, would you like to add something to this discussion?
I mean, I don't have anything at the top of my mind. I'll try to, but before that, I would just piggyback on what Falgun and Vidya have been speaking about. I think 2 points from each. One, from what Falgun mentioned, like personally, I am not a big fan of the MVP model. I believe more in like if you work in tech and product, there's another phrase which is now more in fashion, which is the minimum lovable product. And I think that speaks closer to what Falgun was mentioning, that instead of building something that a lot of people find okay, build something which a smaller number of people really passionately love. And these guys are these are your early adopters, and they are the people who will really spread the word out. And I think that, again, connecting that to what Vidya mentioned, I think finding your niche is super important. Like I think similar for Falgun, similar for myself and Moiz, like we both come from different industries. I work in tech. Moiz also works in tech, and we kind of bring what we learned in those fields into our board game business. The same example with Wingspan. Like connecting or ornithology. I don't know if I got that right, but whatever, bird watching into board gaming. I think you find a niche, and this niche becomes your really passionate early adopters and help spread the word out. Excuse me. I think coming to distribution and sales, I think the most benefit that I can give is just to explain kind of some differences between each sort of player in the supply chain. Like if you see, it starts all the way from a designer, a publisher. In India, often cases those are the same. Like the designers and the publishers are the same because we don't have an existing board game publishing industry. So people come up with an idea, they publish it themselves. Then is sort of the distributors. Even in distributions, there are different kinds of distributors, but let's just say distributors overall. And finally is the retailers. So we operate as both. We operate as retail and distribution. So we do distribution for a couple of publishers, but majority of our business is also retail. Something to keep in mind is that the most risk is at the two ends of the supply chain. So the people in between try to keep their risk minimal, which means that your expectations from a distributor won't be that they market the product for you. That's not how it works. The distributors will only buy games that they know are going to sell in large quantities, because that's how they make money. They don't make money off single sales. They make money off sales of cartons. So, that's something to keep in mind. The risk exists with the retailer that, hey, the risk is that people should buy this game. So again, they're not going to buy a game that's not popular, but their risk is that will they buy it from me? And then the risk for the publisher is this a valid game or not? So I think I don't know if that helps or it's more confusing, but I think just to kind of
That definitely helps, Aziz, and you've rightly looped in the retail factor into this, because that's something that designers also might need to consider at the time of putting their pitch in. So I think this was a fantastic session. We are currently at time for the publishing session. So I'm going to sort of close the session here. I'd like to thank Aziz, Falgun, Vidya, and Amit for sharing so much of information. There was a very important question pertaining to the developer and publisher share. I think that that session deserves a whole session in itself, because we need to definitely talk about the specifics of pitching and then get into how is it that contracts are decided. We've definitely put it down on the list of topics that we should cover in some of the upcoming seminars. I'm just looking at some of the comments. So there was a question by Amishi on sharing some of the forums where publishers ask for games. I think that's a good idea. Maybe putting together a directory of publishers. Amit has said that he might be able to share some information on this, and I'm sure collectively as the lab group grows, we can definitely have some sort of list that will help upcoming designers to have easy access to when they're selecting a publisher that they would like to pitch to. We'll move on to our next and final session for the day, which is on marketing and distribution. We have three speakers over here, and we can maybe have a couple more people pitch in during these sessions. So we've got Aziz from the board game company, we have Falgun again from Dice Toy Labs, and we have Ronak from Chayan Games. So we're going to start off with the first topic, which is and it's sort of interesting because I'm sure all of us at some point in time have come across this particular piece of misinformation on board games, where if you talk about board games to most people, the first impression that they come out is on, are you talking about Uno or Monopoly or Ludo? And I think that's a veil of misinformation that we definitely need to break. I'm going to get Ronak into the conversation here and sort of get his opinion on how he's been breaking this veil of misinformation as one of the forerunners of board game cafes in Mumbai. Over to you, Ronak. Ronak, I think you're on mute. You'd need to unmute yourself.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes. Go ahead.
So yes, so for people who don't know me, I'm Ronak, and I started a board game cafe 2 years ago. And yeah, one of the things that I went into doing this is that I'll have to teach a lot of games. Okay, so that's the basic thing which I went into. Yeah, sure, the board gamers were helpful a lot, and they really helped me out in making sure that I make sense while teaching the game. But over the years, over the time that all the staff that we've recruited, I think that's one of the challenges of a board game cafe, because our business depends on it, right? So what we did is that we started identifying the games which were easy for people to get into. Okay, so we always have a top 10 and top 11 list of most played games, and that keeps changing again and again. I think earlier somebody mentioned about data. So the good thing is that have a data centric approach towards this. Keep in mind who is playing what game, which games are better. Always keep taking feedback. Oh, did you like it or did you not? From a game designer's perspective, or from a game publisher or somebody who's in the back end of making a game, I think feedback is the most important thing. And one of the questions which people you should ask people is that how easy for it was it for you to understand the game? For easy, how easy for it, was it to grasp the game? We continually talk about on the WhatsApp group about rule books. Okay, and some of the people who have pointed out, some rule books are good and some rule books might be not so good at explaining the game. Uh, yeah, I mean, like that's more like that from a market which is completely like for the most part they don't know what board games are, right? Or they think that board games are for kids or something like that. I mean, that there's no other way around it. Like it's like a slowly penetrating thing which will keep on going, uh you know for that. uh Now we have
Ronak, we are losing you. Could you come closer to the mic?
can you hear me now? Is it better? Hello?
Much better.
Awesome. Okay. So what I was saying is that the good thing is that we have increased awareness now. We have events like the Meeple. We have a couple of YouTube channels. Giant Games also has started their own YouTube channels. And the great thing is that we have a lot of community board game groups which regularly or not so regularly maybe host in their own sections in the society. All right, and they play with their friends and families, and the good thing is that some communities have really opened up to new people. All right, and that's the fun part about it. And I would highly encourage everybody to just take one day of a week, 1 or 2 hours, sit in your local coffee shop or something like that, and invite people to play games. Okay, obviously take permission from the owners of the shops first, because that you might just get kicked out maybe. Yeah, so yeah, that's my 2 bits on how to get people involved.
Aziz, would you like to weigh in here?
Sure. I'm just trying to think of this in a way that it's useful for game designers. I think the one thing off the top of my head that I would definitely add, something that as retailers, something that game publishers have done, which have really worked, is giant versions of games. So for those who attended MeepleCon, we had so we distribute games for a manufacturer called Gigamic, a publisher called Gigamic, that publishes kids and family games. And they have giant versions of a lot of their games, and that really collected a crowd at MeepleCon. And we are sure that if we had copies on hand, we would have sold quite a few. So I think in terms of marketing, that's a very physical crowd draw. I think apart from that,
yeah, so that's a very interesting perspective that you got out, Aziz, and I think that's something that even publishers could think of, given that it's a very powerful marketing tool. The very fact that the giant size of the game is sufficient to attract players and then also derive sales is very interesting, and I'm sure that's a lesson not just for designers but also for people who are into manufacturing and who are into publishing as well. Sorry, I cut you off. Please carry on.
Yeah, no, I think, but there's a niche for that, though. I think that works well for family and kids games. I don't expect that every game you sort of make a giant version and it will sell well. But definitely, and I think looking at also our audience, we have a lot of games by Indian publishers on our site, and they all fall into that niche of family kids games. We don't have a lot of very serious site equivalent games yet, which are already published and out there. I know there are a few designers working on that, but they're not ready yet. I think the other thing that I would add in terms of marketing maybe is that so two things. One is, I think board games is a unique industry where you almost have like a catalog of every single game ever produced, which is Board Game Geek. So if you compare that to other equivalent industries, there is not an industry standard like that. And I think having that standard gives a lot of benefits. And I still see that a lot of these games that are designed and published in India still don't make it onto Board Game Geek. So I think that's a very quick one to fix. Because again, like I said earlier, the publicity of the game and the marketing of the game, the onus is on the top side, which is the publishers and the designers. I think apart from that, I think a little bit that is underestimated is how powerful online marketing can be. I think Ronak has started doing that with content. I think tying in the data-driven approach. I think there's a lot you can do with data, figuring out what keywords to track, how to actually market your game, I think there's a lot that we can discuss here. And it's a topic in itself. I think one maybe the last I would end with is that there's sometimes so much to do that maybe it's better not to invest there and rather just outsource it to someone like a platform like Amazon or Flipkart, or again like a plug to board game company. Let us take care of the SEO, the digital marketing, the funnels, conversion funnels, things like that, where the transaction journey is as simplified as possible, and let the designer focus on the core, which is the game itself.
Right, and that brings us to our next question, really, which is, how does one start at distribution, and how does one decide between the offline and the online channel? Maybe you could weigh in, given that you have a very vast amount of experience in distribution, and then maybe we can bring Ronak and Falgun as well on board, given that Ronak is a good offline space where you have a captive audience to sort of get your games exposed. Aziz?
Sorry, I just started reading the comments. I missed your question. Sorry, could you repeat?
So we were talking about, how does one really decide between the online and the offline distribution platforms? What are the pros and cons behind each?
What do you mean by offline distribution platforms?
So we spoke about Amazon and the like, where you have your games that are marketed by these online platforms, and then you have the other offline stores like Hamleys, or even sources such as Giant Games. Falgun, maybe you want to take this question while Aziz gathers his thoughts.
I can actually, yeah. So,
Aziz, you want to go?
Sure. So I think the first thing is the offline requires a lot more work. There's a barrier to entry in that. I think that is much more conscious of quantity, minimum orders, stuff like that. There's also a lot of risk involved in that, in the sense that some of these models work where the store will actually buy from you, but then the contract would stipulate that, hey, okay, if they don't sell, they can return the stock to you also at the same price. So say you think you've sold 1,000 copies, but then you find out you've sold only 900 copies. I think the online, the barrier to entry is a lot more. I think is a lot less. So if you want to sell on Amazon or Flipkart, or again on Board Game Company, it's very easy to set up and get started. I think while I agree with Vidya that India still is a very touchy-feely, tactile market. Like people want to feel what they're trying to buy before they commit to making the purchase. When the price goes above a certain range. But we've also seen people convert on the side. We've also seen people who've never bought a game before who stumbled on because of something else, and then decided, hey, you know what, I'm going to take the risk on that. So I think to start with, online is just much easier to get started with. It's just sometimes it can get overwhelming. So it might be useful to outsource.
Wonderful. Falgun, would you like to weigh in before we ask Ronak, what is it that customers who are offline look for in games?
Right. So I think the most important thing over here is, even before we think about who is your, whether you're going to go online or offline, is to find out for your product, where does the target market hang out, right? So you need to get as many eyeballs as possible. They have to see your product somehow. More the brand awareness, that's the purchasing decision, right? Like how Aziz was telling about the funnel. Nobody is going to look at an ad and buy it instantly. That happens just 1 or 5% of the times, right? Impulse buying is a very rare thing, especially when it comes to board games. So, consider this. Forget about customers who are thinking that, who have played board games before. There is a massive pool of customers out there who never bought a board game in their life, but they want to buy they could be your potential customer. So if you actually look at from a metrics perspective, I can only talk from India's perspective because we are only focused on India. We believe that India is a massive, massive market yet to be explored, right? So if you look at the metrics perspective, in India, how many board game publishers can you think of, right? most of the games are imported and they're available at Hamleys and blah blah blah. Now, are there stores in India where you can actually walk in and buy a board game? There are none, right? I mean, there's absolutely nothing. You can just count on your fingers the number of stores that you can actually walk in and buy a cool Spieljahrers kind of a game, right? India's market, you have to understand, it is very, very, very fragmented. You cannot discount the fact that offline is crap right now because there is absolutely no footfalls in stores. People buy everything online, and it makes our life easier because we save a hell lot of money on giving out margins to wholesalers, giving out, you're taking care of, you're giving a 50% margin to the distributor, at the same time shelling out a hell lot of money on marketing and ads and all of that stuff. So you need to see where you have to break a balance. I would say our strategy till now has always been, like, it is very easy to capture, it's all about customer acquisition cost, right? Where is it the cheapest to acquire a customer? So it's really, really, really cheap to catch hold of a customer and drive that person to your website, online. So they're on YouTube, Snapchat, Facebook, wherever they are, grab them, at least show your face, like, that there is a product. So the purchasing decision is very simple. It's not like it happens the moment they see an ad. You basically are aware of it. The first thing that comes to your mind when you want to gift something to a friend or a cousin or a small kid, that product should come to your mind. So that is the kind of marketing and advertising you should be doing. So all that comes down to, community. Where is your target market? Have you built a community around you? Have you have you pulled them in, converted them into followers or signups or emails, email contact list? So we have found that online has been super awesome for us because one being the margins, you don't have to give it away, and the most important thing is, the customer who's buying it. You can retarget them, you can send emails to them, they will be your repeat buyers. Each customer of yours could be a repeat buyer in the sense, they will probably bring around 3,000 to 4,000 rupees to your revenue, and that's amazing. So we actually put a lot of effort in building our customer base, whether they have bought it or not. People who showed interest, they are our potential customers, and they're just waiting for the right product. They know that they trust you. They know that you're going to come out with a product in the future, or that's the motive of why you're there in the business. So that's how we run the thing. And the most important thing is to get data instantly, right? I mean, is your product even catering to that want or a need in the market? If your product is your ads are performing horribly, then there's something wrong, right? I've noticed a lot of this on other designers as well. So you invest a lot of effort in creating a kick-ass product. You start coming out with epic content for your social media and all that. But if you're not getting eyeballs, then it's of no use, right? How do you get eyeballs? That's the next question. You push through ads. There are 100,000 ways to give out ads. You could put it on Hotstar, you could put it on Facebook, Instagram. It's just super cheap, like 35 cents per click. So yeah, there are many ways. So that's from a marketing and business perspective. The other thing that I wanted to talk about is, before you address a distributor, you have to be very, very aware that you're getting your money only after 60 days. That's like the best case, okay? And sometimes you might not get it even after 2 months, 3 months. Offline, this is offline, okay? Online, it is instant. You're sitting on a cash flow, okay? So when you go offline, when you're thinking about giving it to a distributor, you have to be very aware that 50% of your margin is going. So if you need to make any amount of profit over that, your production cost should be 1/4 at least of the MRP. So, so it's a huge thing, right? I mean, this is the place where you break your head. So you're working towards, now that you have a community, now you have everything, you have a product idea, how are you going to price it, right? So it all is very, very closely knit. You have to start figuring out and work backwards, see where your target market is, what is their basket size, what is their purchasing power, and stuff like that, and then work backwards, right? And then see which is the product that can fit in. So I think from a business perspective, but from a designer's perspective, you'll again that's the same dynamic. You'll have to figure out who are publishers and sellers in the space. You know, I mean, I can go
Wonderful.
on.
That's a ton of information, and I think quite a few of those points merit a session in themselves. We are seeing a lot of comments that are coming up. Let's take those comments up once we've have Ronak weigh in and his inputs on how does offline work and what does somebody who's looking for a game when they're in that particular mindset after they've sort of either been exposed to particular games within the cafe or outside the cafe. Rana, could you like to weigh in?
I think Ronak left the meeting. Like there was a notification that he left the meeting.
Yeah, can you?
No, I see him there.
He's
Okay,
back.
he's back in. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. You can hear me, right?
Yes, we can hear you.
So there were a lot of points which I wanted to cover, but Falgun has already covered. So Falgun, you kind of stole my thunder there. But okay, so coming to the main thing where, how do people decide if they want to buy a game or not? All right. So first thing what they want to do is they want to try before they buy. Okay, so this is a very important point which I would like to highlight to all the designers or people who are, at least trying to put a game out there, is that in the Indian market, which I've seen very frequently, people always want to try, and they just don't want to try once. They want to try again and again and again and again because they want to make a purchasing decision right now at this point. So what I've done is that I've observed a lot of people, and I would just like to outright name them. One is Mango Shots. Okay, so Mango Shots have come up with a game called Brouhaha, and Brouhaha, they've been always out there. They've kind of like taken it, they've area control, taken the whole thing. Okay, they are there on house party apps. They are there on. They gifted a game to all the board game cafes. They keep on tagging people and all of that. So that's a great thing. One more international example is Blood on the Clock Tower. I'm sure most of you guys have heard about Blood on the Clock Tower, and they have been superb. And lastly, a very good example is our own, you don't have to go far away, is Shasan. I don't know how many people have played Shasan, but I'm sure most of you guys have heard about it. All right, so they did an excellent job of putting themselves out there, making sure more and more people play the game. As many people play the game, as many people try it before they buy it, they are more going to be inclined towards purchasing the game. I think that's one thing which designers or publishers should always focus on. If one thing, I have received a lot of demo copies from a lot of publishers, just like that, even from international publishers. Like Blue Orange has given me almost all of the demo copies in my cafe. Copies in my cafe are from Blue Orange, are demo copies. All right, so a big shout out to them. And because of them, yes, a lot of games have been sold because Blue Orange also has this very good price point under 1500, under 2000. Okay, so that is what something which is very, very cool that I've noticed. Yeah.
Fabulous, thank you. So, if we were to condense the key points that have emerged from this discussion, there are three very interesting tracks that have emerged. The first one is on community building, and I think that's something that was consistent across the board, and that's something that each of you on this panel is building and is leveraging to ensure that there is awareness on the way that games are distributed and on the way that people play games. The second thing is on data, and that's something that's really important when it comes to marketing. I'm saying this as somebody who is in marketing myself. Data is sort of a gold mine that will help you decide the kind of product that you want to build, decide how you want to streamline and develop that product further, and it will help you distribute it in the most effective and efficient way possible. And online is definitely one of those spaces that is data rich. You do have some information offline as well, but there's no real source of it that's collated. And the third point is what Ronak very rightly said. Most people, at least in the Indian space, are not very aware of board games. So try before you buy becomes a very important facet to connect with users on games. I'm seeing a lot of comments in the comment section on distributing to schools, and I think this is again a topic that could be a session in itself, given that we have a number of publishers doing educational games. Yeah, I think this has been a very productive set of sessions. We are now at time. We're about 11 minutes after the time that we were supposed to wrap up. We sort of hoped that we would do the session between 1.5 to 2 hours, and I think we've sort of managed to cover a lot of ground, though not everything that we had set out to cover, because the volume of content in each topic is just so vast. I'd like to thank all our speakers that came out today. All seven of them. I'm just pulling out the list. I'm sorry, I'm very bad with remembering names. So thank you, Anuja, Amit, Aziz, Harshal, Vidya, Ronak, and Falgun, and thank you to everybody else who have contributed during the course of these 4 sessions. What we're going to do is sometime later in the day, we'll send out a feedback form that'll enable you to tell us what you liked about these sessions, what you'd like to see more about these sessions. If there are any brickbats, any bouquets, please feel free to add them to the feedback form. We'll have a free input field where you can write in as much text as you'd like. The more inputs we get, the better it is, and it's definitely going to help this small community. We see that throughout all the 4 sessions, we've averaged around 40 to 42 users. We currently have about 32 people who are live, but at its peak, during the publishing session, we had about 44 users that were live. So thank you everyone for spending your Sunday with us, and thank you to all our speakers for sharing all this information. We look forward to hosting the next session, maybe 15 days or a month down the line. We'll discuss it on the lab group, and let this be a collaborative effort. Thank you everyone for joining, and with that we'll sign off for the day. Thank you so much.